Hello everyone, B.O.B. here, and welcome to another Minecraft tutorial. Now you may remember about 2 weeks ago that I built this starter melon and pumpkin farm, and just to demonstrate how that worked, I'm going to simulate growth by placing a pumpkin here. Uh, oh, right. Today we're actually going to be building the more industrial design that I promised in that tutorial. And this thing is all about maximizing the space within a chunk and, well, basically producing as many melons and or pumpkins that we can within that amount of space. Uh, it is more of an end game build when you really look at it. You can cheap out on some of the materials, but the biggest things are going to be the sticky blocks, they can all be auto farmed. It just takes time. Now, the materials required for this build, you're going to find them in this chest right here. We're going to have a double chest for collection. That would really only be necessary for melons. Pumpkins don't gather as fast, but doesn't hurt to have a double chest. We're going to need 3 hoppers, 31 powered rails, 89 regular rails, hopper minecart. You're going to need 30 redstone blocks, but about 29 of those you could replace with cheaper means of powering a block. This is just going to be powering a rail system, and we can talk about that during the build process. You will need at least 17 sticky pistons, 2 redstone comparators, 3 redstone repeaters, 2 redstone torches, 19 dashes of redstone dust. I'm going to be putting 60 end rods into this build. Now, of course, end rods are an end game material, and you might not have 60 of them. You could replace these with glass panes, iron bars, fence posts, anything with a small hitbox that you can place in a single block. But if you do replace these with something else, keep in mind you're sacrificing some of the farm's light, so you might want to replace just a few in the center with some sea lanterns or glowstone. There again, we can talk about that during the build process. Now you will need 64 slime blocks and 56 honey blocks. You could have the reverse. You could have 64 honey blocks and 56 slime, but you will need that many sticky blocks in that variation. You're also going to need 46 glazed terracotta. You will need about 39 structure blocks, solid building blocks. Some of those are give and take. You're definitely going to need at least 30 stone blocks of your choice. I'm putting 72 glass blocks into this build. Yeah, you don't necessarily have to do that. You could just do some of the glass. You don't really need any of the glass as long as you're properly lighting it. But you want to see in your farms, right? And then here again, I'm adding just 4 sea lanterns just for decoration. You don't need to have them in there unless, of course, you need to add some lighting sources towards the center. Um, uh, Here again, we're gonna plant 60 plants right off the bat. So whether you're planting melons or pumpkins, you're going to need 60 seeds, and you're going to need a whole bunch of water. So just have, 2 buckets so you can make an infinite source. Now the area for this build is a 17 by 12 space, which I have outlined in iron blocks. The smooth stone blocks I have here actually represent the borders of the chunk that we'll be building in. And as you can see, a little bit hangs out over the outside of that chunk, but it's really just some framework. All the important parts of the farm, such as redstone or where the plants will be actually growing, they're all going to be within this one chunk. Alright, now to get started on this build, we're going to mark off where the corners of the farm is actually going to be. So what we're going to do is come to the very corner of the chunk you're going to be building in, and we're going to place that first corner block. And then 8 blocks away from that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and actually 9, because we want 8 blocks in between those 2 blocks. We're going to place our other corner block. Now we're going to come clear down to the other side of our build area. That's 17 blocks away from the block you just placed. We're going to place another corner block right there. And then right up here, do the same thing. So it'd be 8 blocks from that block 17 blocks from the very first block you placed, and right there marks off the 4 corners of our farm. Next step is going to be collection. So we're going to come to the back side. Well, I guess this would kind of be the front if this is where your collection point is going to be. But this is where I put it just to kind of tuck everything in neatly. But the side where you got a little empty space inside the chunk here, that's where we're going to put our collection chest. So I'm going to break away this block, and this block right here. I'm going to place a double chest right here in line with our chunk border, and have a single hopper feeding into the back of that. Next, we want a solid block right beside that. Now we want to place a powered rail on top of that hopper, and then we're going to go ahead and just place one more regular rail just to make sure that powered rail is facing the direction we need it. We will be bringing more rails off of this, but first we need to get our power sources in place. So to put in our power sources for our powered rails, I'm going to dig just a couple trenches here. One trench I'm going to start right beside this regular rail, and I'm going to dig this all the way across to the other side of the farm till I get to right here. This is where the end of the farm itself will be. As I said, only the framework will be hanging out over the edge of the chunk. So I'm going to go ahead and just place redstone blocks in that trench. Those are all the blocks that need to be powered in order to power our rail system. Now, we're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to come one block away from the front of our farm, or this side of the farm, and dig another trench. Didn't mean to dig that one out, but all the way to the other side. And then fill that in with your powered blocks as well. Now, like I said, you don't necessarily have to use full redstone blocks for this whole ordeal. You could power those blocks in a much cheaper fashion, as I can show you here. Just placing a redstone torch on the block below the block that you're trying to power will power the rail above. Also, placing a switch on the bottom of the block that you're powering, just turning on that switch will turn on that rail. So, I mean, yeah, like I said, you don't have to use full redstone blocks. This is just the easiest way to do it. Now that we got our power sources in place, we're going to go ahead and lay out the rest of our rail system. So coming off that regular rail we have in place, we're going to lay down some more regular rails till we get to our powered block. Place a powered rail on the powered block, then we're going to make a U-turn. And another powered rail on another powered block, and then regular rails until the next powered block. Another powered rail on the other powered block. Another U-turn. You kind of want to reverse this pattern the whole way across the farm. Now when you get to the other side, your track pattern should look a little something like this. And when you get to the end here, we got our powered rail on the powered block as we have throughout the entire pattern, but we're going to add one more powered rail on the end of that, and then put a solid block at the end of that powered rail. This way, when the cart gets to this end, it's just going to bounce off that wall and go back to where it started from. Now, as for where that cart started from, it's going to be right on top of this hopper, of course, and that's where it's going to sit pretty much all the time. We're just going to send a signal to it occasionally to go through and collect everything in the farm. This way, it's not running back and forth all the time. And just to keep kind of tabs on where that cart is sitting, we're going to go ahead and feed a repeater into the opposite side of that block from the outside of the farm. And then we can move on with the rest of the structure. Now, one thing I like to do, since we got a 2-block foundation in that corner and a 2-block foundation in this corner, is go ahead and make those other 2 foundations 2 blocks. So we'll just go ahead and place one right here and one over here. And, just to kind of keep everything symmetrical. And now what I like to do is put glass in between the 2 legs along the long side of the farm. Now, you don't necessarily have to put glass in here. You could use a solid block. Really, you don't have to put any blocks in there, but we're going to be placing waterlogged stairs on top of those. And if for some reason you broke out one of those waterlogged stairs, all that water is going down to wipe out all that track you just laid. So this is more of a safety precaution just for the construction process. Don't necessarily need to be there, but you might wish they were. So let's go ahead and put another wall of glass blocks on this side. And we're going to switch back to our common building block, and we're going to build just little barriers along the side here. So we're going to go right on top of the blocks we already got in place. So it's one block up. Start on one corner, move across the short side, one block above the ground, so you can have that little gap underneath. There again, you could fill in that gap if you chose, but I like having the ability to see underneath. I mean, the glass will grant us that ability as well, but you know, at least this way you can see from all angles. But we're going to go ahead and put that little barrier on this side. And that's going to be marking the ends of the farm. Now we're going to get our stair block, whatever stair block it is we're using, and we're going to come to the inside of the farm and place these. And you want to place them all along your glass walls, and they're even going to overlap onto these structure blocks here. So basically go from one end to the other, stairs all along the side. Do the same thing on both sides. And you should end up looking at something a little bit like this. Now all we got to do is fill in all the area in between those stair blocks with dirt blocks just like so. Take it like this from step to step and go the whole way across the farm and fill it in. And once you've got all that dirt in place, you should be looking at this right here. So we got our surface for growing our melons and our pumpkins on. We just need to hydrate this land. We're going to do that by waterlogging each one of these stair blocks on the outside. This might be a little bit tedious. Probably while you're doing it in survival mode, you might want to create an infinite water source up here. So that way you're not leaving the farm and coming back or trying to fill up 8 buckets at once or whatever you're trying to do. It's just easier to create a temporary water source on the surface here. Waterlog all of these steps, and then you can take out that temporary source when you're done. Okay, now each one of your stair blocks should be waterlogged, as you can see here. You see the water on the step on each one. Now we need to start plotting out where we're going to be growing our crops. So what we're going to do is we're going to till sort of a checkerboard pattern into this dirt. We don't need to till every single piece. We're going to go every other. So I want to go here, 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 and we're gonna kind of reverse and go back the other way. Same thing. Just do this the whole way across the farm till your whole farm has this checkerboard pattern like you see here. And when you get that part complete, it should be extremely satisfying just to look at. Look at that image. It looks great. Now you can see the blocks in the middle are being properly hydrated by the waterlogged steps on the outside. So you're safe there. Lighting is also going to be an important factor, and that's sort of what we're going to be working in as we're planting it. This is why I chose to use end rods for this particular part of the build. And like I said, you could swap them out with glass panes or iron bars, even fence posts. And, well, once we get everything laid in here, we'll talk about where you might want to put in some extra lighting sources, since you wouldn't be using the end rods. Since I am using the end rods, I'm going to go ahead and start. So all these blocks that aren't tilled are where I'm placing my lighting sources. And then the ones that are tilled, of course, are the ones where I'm going to plant my seeds. So we should have something like this. We have lighting source, lighting source, lighting source, seed, 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 lighting source, lighting source, lighting source. And now as I'm putting these in here, if I were doing this in survival, it would be a good time to be bone mealing these stalks as you're putting them in. Once you get the farm up, you're not going to be able to get in there, and it might take a little while for those stalks to grow and start producing pumpkins. So your best bet is to bone meal them while you still got the farm open, and you don't really have to worry about them producing any pumpkins that are going to get lost because, well, your end rods are going to be in the way until we activate this farm. So I'm going to go ahead and finish out this pattern that I started. Remember, just seeds in the tilled land, end rods on the land that isn't. So now we have everything planted. We have all our end rods in place, and like I said, you could cheap out on the end rods. Uh, what I'd like to do anyway is just for decorative reasons is I like to put these sea lanterns on the corners here. Here again, doesn't have to be sea lanterns. Could use glowstone. Could use jack lanterns. Um, I just like to have plenty of lighting around my farms, and if you're not using all of these end rods, well, it's going to be difficult to get the lighting towards the center of the farm. So what you would want to do is put in lighting blocks uh, in strategic places around the outside. So like I put some around the middle on each side, and then you got your lighting sources on the corners. But even still, these aren't going to really provide sufficient light for the ones in the center. So what you would do is kind of break away, I don't know, like a few central um, end rods like that one. We could get rid of that. And then we could do another one like over here. So they're nice central locations. They could light up the inner areas of the farm. And those could stay in place. You could use full lighting blocks for the ones towards the center of the farm. You don't need the smaller hitbox because there's still lots of room for the crops to go out that will still land in the harvestable area. The reason we don't want these full blocks on the outside is because whenever those full blocks are right up against the glass that's inevitably going to be here, sometimes those pumpkins or melons can kind of glitch through the wall and they end up outside your farm where they can't be collected. That won't happen if you're using something small like end rods or fence posts, even glass panes to break the plants themselves. Now I have all the end rods I could want, so I'm not going to leave these in here. I'm going to go ahead and replace these with end rods just so that way the farm looks the same the whole way across. And I really don't need these ones on the outside. I'll leave the ones on the corner, just to make it a bit more decorative. But basically we need to wall the whole thing in. We're going to just use glass blocks the whole way around the outside. And when that's done, it should look a little bit like this. And do take notice that I did glass blocks around all four sides of the farm. We got to keep everything inside on the dirt blocks. But we can go ahead and move on to our sticky blocks. You're going to start with whichever one you have more of. So if you have a full stack of honey, but only 56 of the slime, start with honey. If you have the full stack of slime, but only 56 honey, you get what I'm saying. I'm going to start with the slime blocks. So there's more slime blocks in this design than there are honey blocks. We're going to start on this corner end rod, or whatever it is you use to break the plants on the corner there. We're going to place this slime block there, and I'm going to bring that the whole way across to the other side of the farm, just like that. And then right next to that, we're going to do a line of honey blocks the whole way across. Switch back to your slime, go across. Switch back to honey, go across. This is going to be a little bit tedious in survival as you can't fly, and you're probably going to be walking on these blocks as you place them. But yeah, you want to go a whole way across the farm, continuing this pattern. And once you've completed that, you should have something a little bit like this. You know, your nice, colorful, striped, sticky roof there. And next we need to start getting our pistons put in place. So what we want to do is come back here, sort of right above this repeater that we left to signify where our hopper minecart is underneath. This is where we're gonna want to start putting in our sticky pistons. So it's actually right above this corner slime block. I'm gonna put in some temporary blocks. Temporary there, temporary there, temporary there. Let's break away these bottom two temporary so I can get right down here on the glass and look up at that one in the air and place a downward facing sticky piston. Now let's go ahead and get rid of that. And we need more downward facing sticky pistons the whole way across the farm. This, again, will be a little bit tedious, but go ahead and continue that the whole way to the end. Okay, so now we got all our sticky pistons just kind of hanging upside down. They should be one block above all your sticky blocks down below. We're going to come to this end above our beginning repeater here. We're going to just kind of pillar 2 blocks out off of our end piston, and we're just going to kind of leave all that hanging for now. We're going to come back to that. We want to get a clock put in place. Then yes, this farm utilizes a clock rather than observers to detect when the plant is grown. You know, everybody knows that observers could lock up. The plant might grow while you're out of simulation distance or just getting into the simulation distance. The observer might not detect the update, and then you just come about your auto farm realizing there's a crop in there that never got harvested. So in order to avoid that and something this size, we'll just wire it up on a clock. Periodically, all the melons or pumpkins are going to get broken, and then they'll get picked up by the mine cart, and there's really no chance in this thing freezing up. Now, of course, you're going to want a clock with an extremely slow pulse. You're really only going to want this thing to harvest a couple of times a day. So I've chosen to use Ethos Hopper Clock, and you could switch that out with whatever type of clock you prefer, but this one seemed perfect for the job. So what I'm going to do is come one block away from our repeater here. I'm going to place a solid block, have a comparator feeding into that solid block with some redstone dust on top of that solid block, have that redstone dust powering a sticky piston. Right beside this comparator, we're going to want a hopper. I'm going to place one down here temporarily so I can place another one beside that feeding into it. We're going to break away the temporary one so we can place the other one feeding into the second hopper we placed. So that, as you can see, they're feeding into one another. Then coming out of this second hopper, we're going to have another comparator facing the opposite direction, feeding into another solid block with redstone dust. Redstone dust on top of that. And that redstone dust is going to power a sticky piston. Now we just need a redstone block somewhere in between. Doesn't matter which in between you prefer, but one redstone block in between those two pistons. Now we want to put some items inside these hoppers. Now for this farm, I found about a stack and a half worth of items. Is the perfect number, but feel free to adjust that. You know, the more items you put in, the slower it harvests, the less items, the faster. So, I mean, you can kind of customize that to harvest as often as you would prefer. So now I'm just going to throw a couple stacks of cobblestone in here. You can put in whatever item you want, and you can put them in whichever hopper you prefer. Like I said, I'm going with a stack and a half of materials here. I'm not exactly sure in minutes and seconds how long of a period of time that is, but it seemed like it gave enough time so that way at least some pumpkins or melons can grow before the clock triggers the harvesting sequence. Now, if you did not want to leave this clock running all the time or the farm running all the time, you can easily just put a lever on one of these pistons or even this outside block here and power the piston permanently, and that'll freeze up the clock. And then whenever you want to reactivate it, you just unpower the piston. The clock should continue its normal business after that. But I'm going to go ahead and just leave this clock running all the time. It's very slow, shouldn't cause too much lag. But we need to take a signal from this clock and send it into our farm. So we have a place to receive the signal on both the cart and the pistons. We'll have to put our redstone in up there, but we're going to start down here. This repeater, to power the cart, we want this thing set to a 4-tick delay. And the reason why is because we're going to use a single tick pulse to power it. That 4-tick delay is going to stretch out that pulse, so it should be enough time to get that cart up and running. And that signal is going to be coming from a solid block. And we're going to have a redstone torch sitting on top of that solid block with another solid block on top of that redstone torch and another redstone torch on top of that solid block and another solid block on top of that redstone torch. And as you can see, we're just one step down from our line of pistons here. So all we want to do here is redstone dust, then we want another repeater right here. This one doesn't need any delay. We just need to make sure our redstone signal reaches all the way to the end. And it would take that repeater because we are pushing that redstone signal all the way to its 15 block limit. So let's go ahead and run a redstone line all the way to the end of these pistons. And now any signal that gets sent into this block down here is going to not only activate the pistons, but send off your hopper minecart. Now all we need to do is hook the clock up to that power function. We're just going to do that by taking a repeater signal out of that solid block there. And you want that repeater signal because you really only want the thing to trigger whenever this changes positions. If we were detecting the redstone dust here or the comparator, it would detect every time the redstone signal changes value. So it would be firing way more often than it needs to. Uh, if we detect whenever this repeater turns on and off, it's only going to be whenever the clock changes positions. And of course, the observer facing that repeater, and that primes your farm. As soon as you put it into place, you can see it reach down and grab those sticky blocks with the end rods. We got melons growing already, and it sent the cart off, but of course that cart's not going to collect anything because we haven't given anything time to grow yet. The only thing we have left to do is to kind of cap this thing off, because of course we don't want our plants to be popping out the sides when it harvests. So in the corners here, you can use whatever building block you want. I'm going to go ahead and continue with my smooth stone pattern. But on these four sides, well, this is where your glazed terracotta comes into play. You know, you can't move these sticky blocks by anything but glazed terracotta or like obsidian, or else those blocks are going to grab a hold of the other block. So of course they won't stick to the glazed terracotta. We're going to use that to wrap the entire outside of this. And if you wanted to build the whole thing in, you would have to go 2 layers with the glazed terracotta. Any area of the farm that these sticky blocks touch would need to be glazed terracotta. Otherwise, it's going to lock up. These pistons are already at their 12-block piston push limit. So any extra blocks attached to this farm is going to break the farm. But really, this is as far as you need to go. This is the farm complete. And as you can see, you know, pumpkins, or I'm sorry, funny looking pumpkins. We got melons growing already inside here. We already have a few harvested. So it's already producing. Like I said, I did a little bit of testing with the pumpkin version. I got about a stack and a half an hour. That'll probably be more with the melons. As you can see, they grow quite a bit faster. Plus, you're getting slices rather than entire melons, so the stacks will fill up faster. But that's it. That's the farm, fully operational, ready to go. You see it harvest. As the cart travels underneath, it's grabbing all of that loose watermelon just kind of sitting on the dirt there. It's going to bring it back, and it's going to drop it all in this chest, and then it's going to sit there until the next harvest. No, as I said, this design was all about maximizing everything. Maximizing the amount of plants that could be harvested by a single piston. Maximizing the amount of blocks that piston could push. Maximizing the length or the distance that a redstone signal can travel. Like, basically squeezing as much as I can into a little space. Well, I mean, it's not that little of a space, but I mean, well, in perspective, it's not that big either, and it's going to produce on a massive scale. You know, so if you don't want to mess with like chunk loading zero tick models for melons and pumpkins, this would be a fast, safe route to go. And that, my friends, completes today's tutorial. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please remember to hit that like button, and if you're interested in seeing more from me, consider hitting that subscribe button as well. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for watching and wish you all a wonderful day.